What you're about to hear is literally one of the most harebrained stories in all of automotive history. It involves a band of waiters, as in the people that work at restaurants, a $10 million government guaranteed grant to build a car, and the venerable Pontiac Fiero. So sit back and grab the popcorn because this is going to be a good one. This is the story of the Antara Viper. Unlike most automotive origin stories, this one did not start out as a racing feud or in the garage of some mad scientist mechanic. This one started at, you guessed it, a steakhouse. The Keg Steakhouse in Vancouver, Canada, to be exact. A handful of waiters who worked at the restaurant, as the story goes, happened to be car guys, and they were enamored with the idea of building Canada's very own sports car, a title that had been dormant for years ever since Malcolm Brickland's attempt to build the safety-focused sports car of the future, the Brickland SV1, crumbled rather spectacularly. Brickland's venture to build the car in Canada was heavily supported by grants and tax abatements from the Canadian government. A lot of promises were made with the SV1, and to be frank, not many of them came true. So surely for the next Canadian-built sports car, things would have to be different, right? Well, for this band of waiters, as you might have expected, they didn't have gobs of money lying around to start a car company with, as that is a very cash-intensive process. What they did have, though, was the very same Canadian government who was itching to give out incentives to spur the creation of new manufacturing companies that operated within their borders. This was the closest thing to free money, so the waiters now had their in. They put on their bow ties and waltzed right into a meeting with some official or bean counter in the Canadian Scientific Research Council, and somehow they managed to walk out with around $10 million in government grants to build their vehicle. To put it in perspective, in 2025, it's near impossible to finance a used car without any credit history. But back in 1984, a group of waiters with a business plan to build a car could get $10 million in grants. Mind you, these were grants, not loans, from a government entity. It was insane. But now that the money was committed, it came down to brass tacks. How the hell were these guys gonna build a sports car? Well, this is where timing was everything. 1984 was also the first model year of the Pontiac Fiero, which was absolutely all the rage in North America that first year. It was an affordable mid-engine platform with decent fundamentals, good looks, and an affordable price tag. They figured that they could use the affordable Fiero as the base vehicle to overhaul and convert into their dream sports car vision and sell while still having some meat on the bone left to profit from. Plus, there was way less engineering involved in just improving the Fiero rather than building their own car from scratch. So that's what they did. The first part of their funding they deployed to build a fiberglass mold and body facility to help build the body panels for their company's first car, and the company would initially be named Cymbria. The Fiero itself was already fiberglass, so a fiberglass tooling facility made sense to make new panels for this car. But how would they build the engines and suspension bits for the cars, considering they already spent a good chunk of change on this facility first? Well, maybe they would have to outsource to a manufacturer like Cosworth or something. Nope, they did none of that. In fact, that initial business plan, the one that the Canadian government greenlit, involved no serious engine modifications at all. The plan was to rebody the Fieros, upscale the interiors with nicer materials, and then sell them for a profit. And turns out that was easier said than done, because rather unsurprisingly, Cymbria's first prototype of their rebodied Fiero came out around 1984, and it had some pretty atrocious fitment issues when it came to these new body panels. Fitment problems that would have pissed people off on a regular priced Fiero, let alone a much more expensive and exclusive custom one. Now, in their defense for just a moment, there were a lot of newly redesigned fiberglass panels on the car. In their redesign, it looks like the only things that they really kept from the regular Fiero were the hood and pop-up headlights, the roof, and the doors. They molded all new front fenders, a whole new wraparound front fascia, new side skirts, new quarter panels, a new rear deck lid / rear hood, and a new rear fascia and wing. For a rebody, they did do a good amount. The new body was curvier, more aggressive, and definitely more Italian feeling. It had some Ferrari 328 to its design, a little bit of Lotus Esprit, a bit of Countach, and dare I say a tiny bit of De Tomaso Pantera if you look at it from the rear 3/4 view. The finished rebody was actually over a foot longer than the regular Fiero. Nonetheless though, all that work to make a new body meant nothing if it was done poorly. In fact, the initial prototype body was so badly received that the company went ghost for a year or two getting their fiberglass process dialed in. In the interim, they also changed the name of the car for its relaunch in 1986. The company would now be called Antara, and their new car would be the Antara Viper rather than the Cymbria Viper, to avoid any negative press carryover from the last prototype. With the molds fixed, Antara then turned their attention to the Fiero's interior, which was one of its concession points to cut down on costs compared to other more expensive sports cars. Antara pretty much Cadillac'd out the interior of the Fiero, with nicely trimmed leather seats, reupholstered leather door cards, a leather-trimmed dash, and more interior luxury improvements. At its core inside though, it was still a Fiero. The layout of the interior was the same, and lots of the cheap 80s GM switchgear still remained in stark contrast to the nicer leather materials. Under the hood though, there was a bit of a problem. See, this new fiberglass body that was over a foot longer added weight, as did a more luxurious interior. But performance would remain exactly the same as a regular Fiero. Why, you might ask? Well, that came down to Antara's sales strategy for this car. Instead of building a dealership themselves to sell these cars, they were somehow able to convince Pontiac and their dealer networks to try and help sell the Vipers for them with a full factory warranty. The stipulation of this warranty was that the vehicles outside of the body and interior mods had to be mechanically stock. And so the Viper, with all its special bodywork, was left with just the standard 170 horsepower, 2.8 liter Pontiac V6. Not exactly a premium engine choice, especially when you consider that after all the custom bodywork and leather work that was done on the Vipers, the Pontiac dealerships would advertise these at a starting price of an insane $30,000 Canadian, or right around 25 grand US if my conversion rate math is accurate. That made these Vipers twice the price of a standard Fiero and just about the same price as the C4 Corvettes. They were still less than half the price of, let's say, a Lotus Elise Turbo, but let's be honest, the Viper's performance did not at all match the price point. For all intents and purposes, this was purely a rebodied Fiero that was twice the price for something that was maybe at best 1.2 times the car. To be honest, I think this car was kind of a ripoff, and customers clearly felt that way too because Antara itself went out of business in 1988. When it was all over and production numbers were accounted for, they left approximately 40 cars in their wake. And it's kind of a miracle they were even able to sell that many. With the dissolution of Antara also came a grim realization for the Canadian government. Their $10 million worth of grants that they sunk into this project had evaporated. However, I don't feel bad for the Canadian government. If you genuinely looked at a business plan to rebody Pontiac Fieros and sell them for twice the price at the same dealership that sold a regular Fiero and thought that that was a good idea, then you kinda deserve to lose your money. And I bet anybody that was involved in the funding of this in the Canadian government still has a sour taste in their mouth for the Pontiac Fiero for this exact reason. But that brings the story of the Antara Viper to its end. I told you, this was a wild one, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you do want to see an example of a rebodied 80s Pontiac done right, then I encourage you to watch my video that I did on the Pontiac Tojan. But otherwise, thank you all for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one, enthusiasts.